Pranams to Sadhguru. Pranams to Guru Bhai. Pranams to Swamiji. Stand corrected. Swamiji told me that for several years during the conduct of other previous editions of Peace and Conflict Conference, he has asked me to chair sessions and sum up what other people have said, as many of them have done last 2 days. But this time I want you to speak, he said. So Swamiji, thank you very much for that. I place the views of some of the educational philosophers and practitioners in this very place sanctified by the feet of Sadhguru. Sadhguru has tirelessly emphasized in all her Upadeshams how we must make ourselves a whole and consecrated being for a higher cause. In her early years, after taking sannyasa, she went to schools and colleges, even to Christian institutions like Stella Maris, and spoke among boys and girls and urged them to think and act differently, coming out of the rut of false education. Gramathla maad poi rut form maadu. In villages, slushy roads, you form ruts. And sometimes the carts get stuck in the rut. Our education system has become like a rut. Sadhguru wanted us to come out of the rut of life, rut of false education. The bottom and top of our existence must be laddered. I wrote it last night. I'm an English professor, or at least I used to teach English. I do not know whether ladder is used as a verb, but I don't know, as I kept writing about the Sadhguru, I just said the bottom and the top must be laddered. So Swamiji, this may not get into dictionary, but I've used that word, laddered by the right kind of education. Swami Hari Prasad has taken Sadhguru's Upadeshams to fantastic heights and reached them to global audience. I'm grateful to him for giving me this opportunity to participate in this valedictory. Once again, pranams to Sadhguru and pranams to Swamiji. Respected chairperson of the session, Sri Mahesh Venkatraman, who was so lucid and visually very, very precise, and other delegates of the conference, and those who have patiently stayed on till this valedictory. This presentation broadly groups its concern. Am I clear? This presentation broadly groups its concern under two, once again, broadly conceived segments. They are not mutually exclusive. In fact, the one often slides into the other. The groups are, Professor Panishalu, this is meant for you, those thinkers and spiritual leaders who philosophize on education. This morning, Professor Panishalu explained what is meant by philosophizing. He said by philosophizing, we mean conceptualizing. Okay, enna karutha number uruvakaram. That is conceptualizing. I cannot be doing as good as you did. Okay. As an integral experience, I'm sorry, I forgot to read my topic. My topic is toward holistic education. I wrote it on the 8th December 2022. So I did not listen to any of these people. I had used the word holistic education. So this group of philosophers who try to philosophize on education. B, those who try to implement a value-based integral educational philosophy in terms of institutions and activities largely embedded in our cultural ethos and civilizational features. It must again be made clear that these are not rigidly compartmentalized divisions. In fact, they share a lot of ideas and concerns. Of course, some of them may sound iconoclastic. I'm going to mention J. Krishnamurti, I've read a lot. And in passing, what's her name? Sri Kaladi lady. Srikala mentioned. So some of them may sound iconoclastic, going against the grain of traditional thinking and the very fiber of our Indian civilization. But it is astonishing to note the commonality of their goals and even their vocabulary, the kind of terms which they use. The overall goal of the philosophers and practitioners of educational philosophy is the integrated education of human beings toward a realization of individual potential as well as collective good of mankind. All of them, with one voice, denounce what is new now offered in the name of education, from the primary level to the highest research. ஒரு எல்கேஜிக்கு இடம் பிடிக்கிறதுக்கு எல்லாம் எவ்வளவு கஷ்டப்படுறாங்க. 2 லட்சம் 3 லட்சம் அதுக்கு யாரையோ பாலிட்டிஷியனை பிடிச்சி இது என்ன வாழ்க்கை வேண்டியிருக்கு, அந்த எல்கேஜில என்ன நடக்கிறது நமக்கு தெரியல. So from that kind of, in the name of education, from the primary level to the highest research, which has reduced knowledge to acquisition. Morning information use பண்ணாங்க. I've used the word acquisition and accommodation of self-interest at the individual as well as world governmental levels. This has concerned me a lot. ஏதோ ஹார்வர்ட் போனேன், அங்க போனேன்னு படிச்சாங்க. இப்போ when I come to think back on it, I have very different kind of an understanding. If Swamiji asked me to speak again on another occasion, I may be touching on these things. You see, I'm not regretting my going there in 1980, 81, and so on. But it is a very different situation. So there is a lot of self-interest, and especially in the world governmental levels. Some of them offer a blueprint of a futuristic education, which they have already begun trying out in what I call in the laboratories of their schools and colleges in the last century. J. Krishnamurti Foundation's schools, everywhere, all over, see, up to Benares and elsewhere in California, the school here in Greenwich Road and so on, where Nandita studied. And then Mother's Pondicherry Aurobindo Ashram School, and then Mother's Sri Aurobindo International School, institution in Delhi. I have met some of the people and so on, long after these people are dead and gone. So all of them offer a blueprint of what I call a futuristic education in the laboratory of their schools and colleges in the last century. While they accept the right to education, I'm very happy that Swamiji made a distinction between right to education and right education. You almost heard it as right to education, because today's society, everybody talks about right to education. Nobody prevents you from going to school or college, but is right to education the same as right education? So right to education is, everybody says, it is a prerogative of everyone. They are, however, skeptical whether it is the same as right education. What encouraged me, Swamiji, to put them all in a single grid is the repeated idea or the use of right education, especially by J. Krishnamurti in his prolific talks and articles. Swami Vivekananda was quoted by Professor Chandrasekhar this morning. Swami Vivekananda said in the 19th century, it is one of the evils of your Western civilization that you are after intellectual education alone and take no care of the heart. It only makes them oftentimes more selfish, and that will be your destruction, he warned us. In section 1 of my presentation, the view of Sri Aurobindo and the mother of Pondicherry Ashram and the views and practices of the thinker and teacher, J. Krishnamurti, are briefly presented. All of them have clearly spelled out their ideas on the nature and goal of education as it should be envisaged in the future, and they severely critique the type of education that is dispensed. ஒரு வாட்டர் டிஸ்பென்சர் மாதிரி இப்படி பிரஸ் பண்றோம், ஒரு கோகா கோலா கொடுக்கறது ஏர்போர்ட்ல, ஓகே, அந்த மாதிரி பண்ணி வச்சுட்டோம் நம்ம. We are dispensing education, and so they critique, you see, this way of dispensing, especially in the last 100 years before and after India's independence. All the three of them have been intimately involved in setting up schools and institutions of higher learning to experiment with their ideas for nearly half a century and more. In section 2, we shall briefly glance at a few spiritual leaders of contemporary India who have been deeply engaged in transforming the educational scenario as integral to their religious ideals and their concerns for society and its well-being. In this category, one may recall the stupendous efforts of Bhagwan Sri Sathya Sai Baba of Puttaparthi, Mata Amritanandamaya of Koilan, and Sri Bangaru Adigal of Adi Parashakti Trust. in Tamil Nadu. If time permits, I may just expand a little on them. They situate their educational ventures within their larger ideal of uplifting human beings and society from ignorance to knowledge. Philosophy also shares the same goal, how to just move people from ignorance to knowledge and from bondage to liberation. இப்போ நம்ம அடிமைப்பட்டு இருக்கோம், எதுக்கோ நம்ம முதலாளித்துவத்துல கூட அடிமைப்பட்டு தான் இருக்கும். அதுலேருந்து எப்படி லிபரேஷனுக்கு போறது, இதுதான் கன்சர்ன் the second groupல. The key term or idea in the thought of all these thinkers and spiritual activists is freedom. FREEDOM. விடுதலையா, லிபரேஷனா, மோக்ஷமா, எப்படி வேணா எடுத்துக்கலாம். தமிழ் படுத்துற இது எனக்கும் கொஞ்சம் பக் என்ன பிடிச்சு கொடுத்து, அதனால எவ்ரி சென்டென்ஸ்க்கு ஏதாவது ஒரு தமிழ் சொல்லணுமோன்னு தோன்றுது. So that time will not be wasted. In terms of its reach, freedom is the highest and most liberal of liberating idea. Of course, the manner and mode in which it is expounded in relation to the domain of education varies from thinker to thinker, whom we have mentioned above. Section A. Chronologically, the views of Sri Aurobindo are the earliest in my arrangement. This morning, you referred to his monograph on integral education. நான் சின்ன வயசுல அதை படிச்சிருக்கேன், அதுக்கப்புறம் திருப்பி எல்லாத்தையும் படிச்சேன். So, he gave a blueprint early in the 20th century of what he called integral education, and the mother put it in practice in letter and spirit in the next 5 decades or so, and even after her death, the ventures are flourishing, continue to inspire aspiring students and scholars, not to omit teachers at the highest level. In this essay on integral education, Sri Aurobindo lists the following aspects: physical education, vital education, mental education, psychic education, and spiritual education. In their ideal, these are not hierarchical realms. முதல்ல physical சரி பண்ணிட்டு, நான் முதல்ல உப்பு பருப்பு எதுன்னு தெரிஞ்சுட்டு அப்புறம் சமையல் பண்றேன்னா நான் ஒன்றும் பண்ண முடியாது. ஓகே, நான் நல்லா உடம்ப சின்ன வயசுல என்ஜாய் பண்ணிடுறேன், அப்புறம் பகவான் அப்புறம் நினைக்கிறேன்னா நடக்காது. அப்புறம் நம்மளால உட்காந்து மெடிடேஷன் பண்ண முடியாது, சப்பலாம் போட்டு உட்கார முடியாது, ஒரு பிரார்த்தனை சரியா பண்ண முடியாது, ஒரு பொங்கல் பண்ணி வைக்க முடியாது. So physically, they are not hierarchical ideas. They are part of harmonious development of a young mind. So, education to be complete must have the 5 principal aspects corresponding to the 5 principles of activities of human beings. He rules that parents give very little thought to it, unaware of the disastrous influence that their own defects, impulses, and lack of self-control on their children. பசங்க என்ன படிக்கணும்னு இப்போ parents ரொம்ப ஆங்ஷியஸா இருக்காங்க. பட் ஐ ரிமெம்பர் மை ஃபாதர், எங்க அப்பா சொன்னார், எங்க ப்ரொஃபஸர் கிட்ட கூட்டின்னு போய், எங்க அம்மா இவளை மேல படிக்கணுங்கிறா, இவளுக்கு என்ன வரும்னு எனக்கு தெரியாது, நீங்க பாருங்க, இவளுக்கு ஒன்றும் வராதுன்னா வீட்டுக்கு அனுப்பிச்சுடுங்க, நான் பாக்குறேன் அப்படின்னு சொன்னார். அப்போ என்னோட ப்ரொஃபஸர் சொன்னார், என்ன இவ்வளவு இர்ரெஸ்பான்சிபிளா இருக்காரு இந்த தாத்தாச்சாரி அப்படின்னார். அப்ப என்னோட இன்னொரு ப்ரொஃபஸர் பேத்ராமன் சொன்னார், இர்ரெஸ்பான்சிபிளா இல்லை, ஹி ரெஸ்பெக்ட்ஸ் ஹர், அவளுக்கு என்ன பொட்டன்ஷியல் இருக்குன்றத கண்டுபிடிக்கணும் அப்படி சொன்னார். So I remember that my 2 teachers had different perceptions of my future. Okay, so the idea that education to be complete must have 5 principal aspects corresponding to the 5 principles of activities of the human being, and parents don't pay any attention to it. Of physical education, Sri Aurobindo says it is completely governed by method, order, discipline, process. Its value lies in replacing, it's a very good idea, lack of plasticity. Now, if we don't care for the physical, our body becomes very stiff. Lack of plasticity by detailed organization. Significantly, he says, physical culture is a process of infusing consciousness. Number physical consciousness sort of connect panade illa. But physical culture is infusing consciousness into the cells of the body. He recommends the methodical and regular development of all parts of the body. The high and fresh point, now I come to an important point, high and fresh point of this philosophy is the focus on vital education, which the mother says is rarely taken up and pursued. The vital holds power, energy, enthusiasm, effective dynamism, complete mastery over the subconscious, and whatever comes up from the inconscient is part of the task of vital education. Vital education has 2 principal aspects, very different in their aims and methods, but both equally important. The first concerns the development of the sense organs. The second concerns the progressing awareness and control of the character, culminating in its transformation. Add the cultivation of discrimination and of the aesthetic sense, the capacity to choose and adopt what is beautiful and harmonious, simple, healthy, pure. Sadhguruடைய 5 உபதேசம் சொன்னாங்க. அதுல கடைசியில சௌச்சம் அப்படின்றது இப்ப சொன்னது அதுதான். Simple, healthy, pure. Then Sharbindo talks of psychological health. Marning ஒரு டிஸ்டிங்ஷன் சொன்னார் ப்ரொஃபசர் பன்னீர்செல்வம். கவுன்சிலிங் வந்து முன்ன சைக்காலஜிஸ்ட் தான் பண்ணாங்க, இப்போ philosophers பண்றாங்கன்னு. So this educational philosophy consists of psychological education too, and therefore there is the psychological health which relates to beauty and harmony, the sensation of the body and of its movement. True aesthetic culture will protect the child from degrading influences. இந்த காலத்துல வந்து பசங்க எல்லாரும் மொபைல் போன், ஸ்மார்ட் போன் வச்சுருக்காங்க. அவங்க என்ன பாக்குறாங்க, அது எப்படி, என்னென்ன ஃபீச்சர்ஸ், எனக்கு ஒண்ணுமே தெரியாது அதுக்குள்ள என்ன இருக்குது. ஆனா அதெல்லாம் பார்த்துட்டு அவங்க வாழ்க்கையை அவங்க எப்படி வந்து சேஞ்ச் பண்ணிக்கிறாங்கன்றது நமக்கு தெரியறது இல்லை. அதுதான் சொல்றவர், ட்ரூ எஸ்தட்டிக் கல்ச்சர் will protect the child from degrading influences. Mental education is to prepare man for higher life. It has 5 phases: development of the power of concentration, capacity of attention, capacity of expansion, organization of one's ideas around a central idea, thought control, and development of mental silence. So mental education, development of mental silence is very important. Psychic and spiritual education, this interested me a lot, deals with the hidden and greater consciousness. It educates one to see oneself as independent of the body. You feel so unwell, but when you stand before Sadhguru or Swamiji, when you begin to say something, you see, you just detach yourself from your body, okay? And therefore, there is a higher consciousness inside, and the circumstances of life are different. It helps to find within the sense of universality, limitless expansion, and unbroken continuity. By way of paradox, Sri Aurobindo says, the principle of true teaching is that nothing can be taught. You don't teach anything, nothing can be taught. The most fascinating aspect of the experimentation or integral teaching is the experiment of what the mother calls free progress. I owe it to my scholar friend, Dr. Meenakshi Hariharan, who was able to get the transcript of this and then send it to me so that I could just listen to it and put down. This idea of free progress may be of interest to some of the teachers from Annai Velanganni. You may not be able to practice this, but what is this free progress? This is the most challenging aspect of the mother's experiment in the empirical field. Mother answers questions raised by teachers in her institutions, voicing genuine difficulties. Free progress is a method of open-ended admission whereby a child or an adult interested in an open exploration of ideas and subjects that can be engaged with the teacher with no closure. Free progress is no closure. There are categories of students whose level of achievement is different in different subjects, and making it very difficult for the teacher trained in the old classical way. The mother firmly says, we are here to do difficult things. It's very challenging. We are here to do difficult things. Men have tried to cure ignorance in the past in the old method, in the easiest way, but we are nowhere near knowledge. However, now humanity is ready to learn better, she asserts. She categorically says there is no theory of free progress. The idea is to help them discover their capacity, each as an individual. The practical problem revolves around sufficient time to be given to each individual, which may outnumber the teacher. When my elder sister Anuradha was admitted to MA, she was the only student. When we were admitted to MA, we were 10. First time we crossed to double digit. Now, when I address my MA or MPhil students, there are nearly 70 of them. So how can I just pay individual attention? This problem is raised by the teachers of mother schools. You see, the mother says one cannot make any theory. It is an attitude which will facilitate a child discovering its possibilities. She says this method is different from outside education. The purpose of free progress method is that there is no external method, but the child must be helped to educate the latent and spiritual faculties. Everybody has latent and spiritual faculties. So in the free progress method, they can be cultivated, they can be brought out. So she certainly warns against mentalizing the issue, for it is a matter of attitude. The problem of multitudes of students raised by the teacher. But for this, the mother says, the number of, in fact, such free progress students may not be actually large. Automatically, it will get sorted out, leaving the teacher to pay attention to the free progress students. Specially qualified teachers alone can handle the challenge. This is different from the classical conventional majority, because such children are, mother uses the term, children of the new future, the shining light of the future. There is no fixity or permanence in the matter. Everyone should be given adequate opportunity to reveal one's capacity, or else they can migrate to the regular stream from the free progress scheme. The spiritual ambience of spiritual education is the key to free progress system. It creates an ethos for capacity of the students to flower and show consecration. It conduces to the making of a living being. How to make a living being, that is a problem. J. Krishnamurti is not only a thinker and teacher, but a stimulating and challenging educational philosopher. His foundation has been running schools and institutions of higher education all over India as well as abroad. He has recorded his interactions with teachers and students in innumerable volumes, so beautifully brought out and so clearly spelled out, very difficult to follow also. He has recorded his interactions with teachers and students of his various schools with astonishing clarity, and they are a valuable document to anyone interested in right education. In fact, Swamiji, Krishnamurti is the one who uses the term right education and right kind of education repeatedly in all his talks. Who is ignorant? One who does not know himself. Education is not a matter of accumulating information and knowledge from books as it is understood now. Education is in the true sense, is the understanding of oneself. Conflict and confusion. There was so much talk about conflict and conflict resolution. Conflict and confusion result from our own wrong relationship with people, things, and ideas. The two presentations talk about this relationship with people. You talk about nature, sustainable, SGD. Am I right? SG. Okay. Krishnamurti comes down heavily on our emphasis on what he calls technique, as Sri Aurobindo before him did. Present-day education puts the emphasis on technique in total disregard, utter disregard of the total process of life. Krishnamurti warns that technique without understanding leads to enmity and ruthlessness. Morning sonnanga, competitive education. Forever we are writing entrance examinations. In life, we keep on writing this kind of examination, that kind of examination, all objective questions. Finally, you know nothing. You end up just marking them, you don't even know whether it is the right answer or wrong answer. So accumulation of facts, a development of capacity, which we call education, has deprived us of the fullness of an integrated life and action. We only develop ruthlessness, and hence we cannot be a peaceful and happy people. Right kind of education should help man to experience an integrated process of life. நம்ம process பத்தி ஒண்ணுமே நினைக்கிறது இல்லை. ஏதோ திருப்பதி லட்டு மாதிரி வந்து டிகிரி விழுந்துடணும்னு நினைக்கிறோம். That's a problem. செமஸ்டர்ல வச்சதுனால மட்டும் நமக்கு ப்ரோசஸ் வரதில்லை. செமஸ்டர்னால ஒரு truncated understanding தான் sometimes இருக்கு. Like mother, Krishnamurti also says there is no method by which to educate a child to be an integrated and free creature. Some of the views expressed by Krishnamurti are quite shocking to traditional minds, sound even iconoclastic. For example, very rarely he dismisses the much cherished word and concept, ideal, I-D-E-A-L. Ideal பத்தி ரொம்ப contemptuous பேசுறார். He regards the very notion as a hindrance to freedom, which is the kernel of his thought. He is firm in his view that ideals cannot change our present values. They are one kind of binding constructs. The golden chain and iron chain சொல்றாங்க அத்வைத்தால. அந்த மாதிரி ideal கூட ஒரு kind of binding constructs, as there are many other constraints. Present values cannot be changed by the right kind of can be only changed by the right kind of education, which is to foster an understanding of what it is. He categorically says ideals have no place in education, for they prevent the comprehension of the present. Ideals can become a convenient escape. Krishnamurti affirms that we need not be idealists, but integrated human beings who are intelligent and free. So there are three ideas which crop up in JK's rejection of entertaining ideals. They are integrated human being, intelligence, and freedom. Hence, he reiterates that right kind of education is not concerned with any ideology. This comes to you again as a shock, because this may come as a body blow to contemporary exaltation of ideology to the level of great Vedantic truth. So, but educational philosophers like Sri Aurobindo, the mother, and JK are concerned about holistic education, and anything that vitiates it has no place in their visualization of education. As an antidote to ideology, this morning somebody spoke about it, Krishnamurti presents love. He says, only love can bring about an understanding of another. The highest function of education is to bring about an integrated individual who is capable of dealing with life as a whole. Another function, this is also something that excites my mind and something was mentioned in the morning. Another function of education is to create new values. We think that all values have been created once and for all. It's not like that. New values are created. This is of paramount importance in the context of universal chaos, conflict, disaster, crippling societies, and world at large, as in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. In answer to a question, Krishnamurti says, right kind of education can bring about a fundamental alteration in human relationship. He points out that it's a very important point he makes. We have never tried it. Since most of us seem to be fearful of the right kind of education, we are destined, we are disinclined to try it. That is his diagnosis. It means we are really not interested in encouraging an individual to flower greatly in love and goodness. He insists that unless we voluntarily bring about a radical change in education, we are directly responsible for the perpetuation of chaos and misery. Discipline then becomes a substitute for life. Now I come to the linchpin of Krishnamurti's thinking at large and on education, freedom. Freedom, he says, is not a goal. Freedom is not an end to be achieved. Freedom is a beginning. Freedom can never come through discipline. It can never come through resistance. Freedom does not mean opportunity for self-gratification or setting aside consideration for others. He firmly believes that sensitivity can never be awakened through compulsion. We are ambitious for ourselves, in the process stifle the freedom of others. For Krishnamurti, implicit in right education is the cultivation of freedom and intelligence and conformity, and obedience have no place in the right kind of education. Definition of intelligence. Intelligence is the discernment of the essential, and it comes out of freedom from hindrances. Right education comes with transformation of ourselves. We must re-educate ourselves. The task of educating the teacher is given much importance in his philosophy, educating the educated. He shocks us by declaring that truth is far more important than the teacher. Now he comes to a very important question. Why is it that there is no collective effort to initiate right kind of education? He diagnoses the reason as follows. Right kind of education, obviously, is a danger to any government, for it is the function of the government to take the right education, to see to it that it is not important. This morning, Professor Paneerselvam mentioned how he collaborated with Professor Sinha about the new educational policy. There was no opportunity to get up and ask him at that time. But JK is saying that governments are not interested in bringing out or trying this kind of education which conduces towards integration. I wanted to ask him, why is it that some of the states are resisting the idea, if there are two paramount ideas which you mentioned, okay? One is culture, the other is philosophy. How to just integrate the two in education? Why is it that some states think, for various political reasons, that it should not be implemented? So, Krishnamurti is very, very, I should say, he condemns, for instance, how the governments are against, they are not in favor of the right kind of education to be instituted or imparted. One aspect of right education, which both Krishnamurti and the mother reiterate, is creativeness. For Krishnamurti, it is a state of being in which conflict has completely ceased. Mind ceases to create, there is creation. To the question, what is the place of discipline in education? Krishnamurti laconically says, I should say, none. It is very difficult in modern civilization to bring about by means of education an integrated individual. His argument is that in the first place, to have education of the right kind, you must become intelligent. You must start anew. I'll just go further down. Krishnamurti conceived the present crisis in civilization across the globe. It is a result of wrong values in man's relationship to property, people, and ideas. He refers to what it has engendered: poison of nationalism, economic frontiers, sovereign governments. I think Father took up the idea. Sovereign, are we sovereign at all? You may be in India, but is India sovereign? The question of sovereignty. So sovereign governments and patriotic spirit. All of this, you see, exclude man's cooperation with man for the benefit of man. Now, talking about a world in crisis, I came to a very important point and I felt very deeply disturbed. Krishnamurti says, a child, when it grows into mankind, is already aged. We tax the students so much, we trap them in technique. When the child grows into manhood, the child is already aged. He will never mature. He will never mature. Modern education has failed, for it has overemphasized technique. So education may have different meaning altogether. Right education for him is surely finding a different way of life, setting the mind free from its condition. Now, we come to an important aspect of this conference, that is peace. What does Krishnamurti say about peace? He says, peace is not the opposite of conflict. Another kind of peace is there, which is much more difficult to understand. A peace which is not a reaction. நம்மளுக்கு ஸ்பிரிச்சுவல் எஜுகேஷன்ல சொல்லி கொடுக்குறாங்க, உடனே எதுக்கும் ரியாக்ட் பண்ணாத அப்படிங்கிறாங்க. ஸோ பீஸ் இஸ் நாட் அ ரியாக்ஷன் டு பிகாஸ் மார்னிங் கொஸ்டின் எடுத்துனீங்க, வயலன்ஸ் வாருக்கு ஆப்போசிட்டா பீஸ். வார் இல்லைனாலும் பீஸ் இருக்குமா? இல்ல பீஸ் இல்லைனாலும் வார் இருக்குமா? So we come to this idea, another kind of peace which is not mere, it's difficult to understand, a peace which is not a reaction, not just the opposite of conflict. It is a peace in which there is no conflict. Peace is like freedom, the love of a thing for itself. Matthew Arnold says, love of a thing for itself. And the state eppadi poga mudiyum. In a review of Meenakshi Tappan's book on Krishnamurti Education for Peace, this review finds similarities between Krishnamurti's vision and such Indian educators like Tagore, Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, you mentioned them in the morning. And for the promotion of humanistic values, they share in an atmosphere of freedom, a concern for others and for the earth, for the holistic outlook based on knowledge, and the need for a strong ethical foundation. Krishnamurti, however, did not envision an education from within the confines of a particular nation or a culture. He did not identify with any religion or tradition and was not a nationalist. There are other educators had struggled against colonial power, which was struggling and subverting the native cultural tradition. Krishnamurti understood the danger of identification, which will vitiate his holistic vision if allowed. His educational vision is not utopian or idealistic. Freedom is fundamental. I now come to the last part of my presentation. In the last two sections, in this last section, I will briefly place the philosophy and practice of Sri Sathya Sai Baba in the field of education. In the higher education program, in his institutions, 60% of time is marked for intellectual academic activities and 40% of activities related to integral education, which has dimensions of devotional, cultural, physical service. You know very well how there are wonderful services rendered by Sathya Sai Baba of Seva, you see, during summer and May month, Khatri and so on. And in every way, you see, they are selfless in their service. Adherence to discipline and appropriate behavior are two important aspects of education. The 5 human values stressed by Baba are truth, right conduct, peace, love, and non-violence. I'll be finishing in 5 minutes. Okay. The philosophical dimension of his educational system lies in the stress on foolishness of ego and false self, and the aspiration for true knowledge through practice of human values. Empowerment of women and respect for environment, service to the downtrodden are the hallmark of the practice of his spiritual education. I must mention an important aspect of Sri Sathya Sai Baba's method. The unique aspect of Sri Sathya Sai Baba's system is the tradition of holding Bala Vikas. This involves parents. This is outside of instructional structures. Now, outside of the school, it involves parents and voluntary teachers who help their own progress. It has its own curricula, activities, global conclaves from all over the world they come. Bala Vikas, you see, incentives for sharing, caring, progressing, not to regiment the youth, but to encourage them to flower forth. Mata Amritamandami Ma, she is no philosopher, but she has just contributed enormously to spreading education, giving primacy to spirituality and cultural studies in higher education courses. Some of my students have studied there and also worked there and so on. New curricula are designed to conduct to conduce to this goal, to make study culturally relevant. It attracts global teachers and researchers who come just for the sake of consecrated work. Bangaru Adigal, like Sri Sathya Sai Baba, he is concerned with empowering women, bringing the best of all, serving the region and community, kindling people's spirit and aspiration through bhakti and surrender. Mention may be made of the project Shaktinari, conceived in 2012 and experimented with Sri Adi Parashakti group of schools to come up with a parallel curriculum for physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being and socially conscious growth of school children. Some aspects would include training children in nature worship, that is expressing gratitude to the 5 elements, intelligence, interpersonal relationship management, tackling peer pressure. This project entailed activities to uphold the value held aloft by Sri Bangaru Adigal as a motto. His motto is, spirituality is the only path for peace. Nature, mother, divine faith, only these will lead to serenity. As I have mentioned right in the beginning, Sadhguru has just given us a complete blueprint in very succinct terms in her Upadesham. It is for us to just apply everything in our life. And I do hope I'll have another life to just get into a new kind of educational system and present a different kind of paper next time in my next Janma. Thank you very much.